So client story time. This is actually something that happened to me earlier today, right before we started filming. I got a call from or actually a text message from a client saying, "Hey, I'm working with a real estate agent and a lender. I'm not really super happy. Can we talk?" So he called me, told me he was working with a real estate agent that he found I don't know where. Um, wasn't really super happy with the service that he was receiving, so he contacted a real estate agent that I know who referred him to me. He was working previously with a pretty large retail lender that I won't name specifically, but if you're in Palm Beach County, it's one of the ones that like everybody has heard of. They're a big, huge operation that a lot of people use. Um, he was very, I don't want to say upset, but he wasn't really feeling super easy about it because the person that he was working with at this large establishment was being kind of like cagey almost, really giving him like very kind of like murky information about like what the costs were, was quoting him, a very $17,000 in closing costs on a program where he was getting down payment assistance. And like he was explaining it to me. And as he's explaining to me, like the numbers didn't really make sense to me. He said nothing was really explained very well to him. And he started out like he was very excited. He really wanted to buy a house, but he started to get like discouraged and kind of like thinking like, I don't know if I want to do this. This doesn't make sense. So we had a quick 30-minute conversation. I kind of ran him through all the numbers in a lot more detail. And he left that conversation pretty fired up again to be back on the track for homeownership. Things started to make a lot more sense to him. So I think the lesson is if you are a consumer, like especially somebody who's a first-time home buyer that's never done this before, there's a lot of information and stuff that like if you look at this mortgage settlement statements and you're like very familiar, you've done this a bunch of times, that like makes sense and doesn't require a ton of explanation. If you've never done it before, like it can be pretty confusing and pretty daunting. So I would say that somebody deserves, as a first time homebuyer, like you deserve a certain level of care and attention to make sure that like everything, this massive multi-$100,000 purchase that you're making for the first time ever, makes sense to you and that you like know where all your money is going. Nobody likes that idea. you know, you don't want to buy a house like you're all excited for this house and then walk away like you just financed a used Hyundai at 19% interest. And as somebody who has financed a used Hyundai at 19% interest in the past, like that's not a good feeling. Nobody wants to do that. So like we want our customers walking away from the table knowing where every single dollar is spent. Having a very good understanding of like if you're asked to write a $6,000 check or a $10,000 check or a $15,000 check, like, where all that money is being allocated to. Who's getting paid what. So I think that from like a consumer standpoint, like don't settle for less than that. Like you should be getting good customer service, and it's not too much to ask to have somebody like explain this stuff to you in detail. From a loan officer perspective, anybody who's listening that's a loan officer, it's super important that you explain this stuff in detail to your customer because it might make perfect sense to you and not require any explanation. But I know I look at this stuff every day. I've seen thousands of settlement statements, been a part of thousands of transactions. It doesn't come naturally to everybody who hasn't seen this stuff before. So just taking a step back and realizing like sometimes this stuff needs to get broken down in a little bit more detail, and you might have to explain things more than once to someone who's never done this before. You will make somebody feel a lot more comfortable, and feel a lot better about the transaction that they're going through with. If you just take a step back, slow down, take a breath, and explain it like you're explaining it to somebody who's never done this before, because a lot of people haven't. So I just think that like people forget about that. We get so as financial salespeople or loan officers or however you want to put it, loan originators, like we get all tied up in the whirlwind of like, oh, we're making money, we're doing business, we're doing all this stuff, but like I think it's important that we slow down and sometimes get back to basics when it comes to like customer service and just explaining how this stuff all works to people who maybe have never done it before. So that's just kind of what that client story illustrated. It made me realize, not that I'm not usually aware of it, but, it just made me realize like how simple and easy it is to make somebody feel comfortable if we treat them like they're a family member. You know what I mean? Like somebody like, my brother who's never done this before, if he called me and asked for help, like I would take 20, 30, 40, 50, an hour and a half and just literally explain and make sure that everything was beaten to death, that he understands everything inside and out as much as he possibly can. So if I treat every single client like that, I'm not going wrong. You know what I mean? Nobody is going to be displeased with the level of service that you provide if you treat everybody like family. So I would just encourage anybody who's listening to this to do so. And you'll go far. You'll go far in this business.